All right, we're going to have our processor panel get started here. We're fortunate to have Ned Atwater from Atwater's Traditional Food here in Baltimore, Maryland. Robin Morris from Mad River Food Hub in Waitsfield, Vermont. Ron Tanner from the Specialty Food Association, representing the Northeast chapter based in New York, New York. And Simon Woods from Love Beets in Rochester, New York. The panel is moderated by Bruno Xavier at Cornell University. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone at NECAFS, for this wonderful conference. It's been very well organized. It's been a pleasure. Very productive, all the meetings that we have held so far. And I hope this one is going to be added to that list and that it's productive and somewhat entertaining because it's 3 o'clock, I understand. It starts to get heavy in the afternoon. So I'm probably going to sit there, so hopefully that can stimulate conversations within the panel a little more. So my name's Bruno Xavier. So I work with the Cornell Food Venture Centers. I've been there in this position for 2 years now. And our program is an extension program by the Food Science Department. We are not in Ithaca. We are in Geneva, New York. It's a separate campus, which is more focused on food, agricultural commodities, foods. And now, in fact, now our campus has a new name. It's called Cornell Agri-Tech. So we think that's fancy. But anyways, and we provide validation for food manufacturers and mostly acidified foods, but that has changed a lot in the last few years. So this program is 30 years old in 2018, and it started with the need for scheduled processes for acidified foods, but that has changed a lot, as I was saying, because in New York State, an inspector can ask for a scheduled process, or as they like to refer to as a process review. So even a refrigerated food, if the inspector thinks is appropriate, they will ask for a processing authority, take a look at that process, and that comes to us. For us, is exactly the same document. We call it scheduled process. So we issue a lot of documentation for food manufacturers that are not producing foods that will ultimately be registered with the FDA, but rather because of a requirement by Ag and Markets, which is a regulatory authority in New York. So we have seen an increase in those services, and we used to do a lot more training, several other research activities, and now we're very focused on providing this validation for processes. In 2017, actually, we did 2,208 process reviews for about 60% of them are in New York State, 147 in Massachusetts, but and we see an increase in growth. And our approach to the function that we have, what we need to provide, are those services that food manufacturers will not find at a reasonable price and with the quality that is necessary to ensure food safety in the private market. In fact, we work with food consultants very often, where they will provide, for example, the food safety plan, but when it comes to controlling a hazard, they need external validation. That's when we come in, that's when we offer the scheduled process to make sure that critical control is properly monitored. And sometimes we may say that that's not a critical control. Anyways, that's the review process that we go through whenever we receive a request from a food manufacturer. So that way, we have been able to focus on exactly what the function of this extension program is, and we have been growing a lot since then. We expect to continue expanding on fulfilling these needs. As I mentioned yesterday, for whoever was present in the processing sections yesterday, the need for validation for different kinds of processes have increased a lot with the Food Safety Modernization Act. And for some types of equipment and products, there is a need, there is a gap that has to be bridged by extension programs. And we hope that we will be able to create the possibility or the programs that will help us bridge that so that food manufacturers, for example, can make foods that have been seen as safe for a long time, such as breads, as in the example that I brought up yesterday, and now you may need a validation for that baking step. And we don't have data. We need to produce data. That will cost a lot. There's many people involved with that, but the results may not be widely available. So that's another a very important need that extension programs need to cover, and we are very aware of that. We hope to be able to continue that for another 30 years or so as the needs change. But anyways, I will ask now Ned to introduce himself. If you want to take the stand, or from there, it's up to you.
This is good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. I'm happy to be here. I'm a food processor right here in Charm City. I started as a very small, a couple of loaves of bread at a farmer's market person, and now we have a facility that supplies our small group of restaurants. So the learning curve has been steep for me for the last 18 years, and it's getting a little bit steeper now with FSMA, so, but we're still trying, we're still working at it.
Okay, Robin?
So I came out of New York City with a financial software background, and I moved to Vermont in 1994, and ended up with a pizza company as their CFO. That was an 8-year apprenticeship in food production. So then in 2010, I decided I'd had enough working for other people, and I'd start a business incubator for food companies. And that's when the concept of the Mad River Food Hub started. These small and emerging businesses were really important because they're the future food companies that we're going to have in the States. And I wanted to give them every hand up that we could. So in 2011, I founded the Mad River Food Hub. And what I wanted was a safe environment for food companies. Today, we have 9 employees, spread over a processing facility and a tasting facility. And if you think about a restaurant, the processing facility is the back of house, and the tasting facility is the front of house, where we show our products that are made at the Food Hub and also products from the community. We provide our community with cold storage and dry storage. We also do distribution and backhauling. So we'll distribute product out of the valley during the morning, and we'll bring back pigs, or we'll bring back milk or cream from somewhere else into the valley in the afternoon. In our processing facility, we have Bill Kavanagh. Bill's the guy next to the salamis. He's both HACCP certified and PCQI certified, certified down in Massachusetts at one of the courses. And our customers make both USDA and FDA regulated products. And a good example of that was we had a soup manufacturer who was making vegetable soups, and one day he said, well, can I make meat soups? And so we put a HACCP plan together, and he was making meat soups within a month. In the same facility, he made vegetable soups. That was the first time the health inspector met the meat inspector. So we maintain 11 HACCP plans at the moment, and put it in context, for a meat facility, most meat facilities will maintain 2 or 3 HACCP plans. So every different product that we make on site is a HACCP plan. And we also are regulated with 8 permits from federal, state, and local organizations. So far, we've graduated a number of employees, and all our tests are negative.
I've been talking to Robin a little bit, and let me just go through this slowly. You have dairy products, or you're under PMO.
Sorry?
You have some dairy products, so you are under PMO for some of them. The pasteurized milk ordinance, correct?
No.
No?
No.
So you don't buy raw milk?
No, we are. So what we're doing is we're using our assets for the community.
Okay.
And three organizations in the community came to us and said, hey, do you go down to Middlebury, Vermont? And we said yes. They said, well, there's a dairy down there, and we'd like to bring the products back into the valley, and they don't distribute into the valley. So we said, that's fine. We've got a empty truck coming back. We'll bring the products back.
Okay, so you're not, but you do have USDA products.
Yeah.
You have HACCP. You have some fresh produce. You have, so I guess the only thing that you don't have to be compliant to is PMO.
Correct.
Okay, good. Are you going to be under the FSMA, depending on your size? How is that?
So our policy is if a business comes to our location, then we're expecting that business to grow. And so we want them to meet FSMA regulations or whatever regulations are required by their future customers.
Okay.
So if a customer comes to us and says we want to sell to Whole Foods, then they've got to be aiming for that SQF or a similar type audit at that point.
Okay.
And we're constantly getting people coming in to audit us from different organizations. So my opinion is the small manufacturer is the most dangerous manufacturer we have out there. And so why shouldn't they adopt the safety standards from day one?
Okay, so basically you're trying to assume that.
Yes.
So we're going to be FSMA compliant. Okay, brave. Okay, oh, I'm sorry. Ron?
My name's Ron Tanner with the Specialty Food Association. Specialty Food Association was founded in 1952. We were founded by a group of importers in New York City. They would meet like one Friday a month for lunch over in the West Village. Back then, the West Village was where all the tough dockmen came in and where all the olive oil came in and where these people would come to talk about different things. Usually after that lunch, if they saw each other in the street, they'd probably kill each other. You know, they walked around with dollars in their socks and stuff like that. It was a little bit of a rough industry. But fast forward, 65 years, something like that. We now have 3,800 members who manufacture, distribute, and retail specialty food products. About 1,000 of those members are in the Northeast. Many of them are small businesses, under $1 million, and are making almost any type of category you could think of, from dairy to charcuterie to salsa to pasta to different things. I was thinking on my way down here about how far our members have come in food safety, and they haven't come nearly as far as they should, but they've come a little further from this one member that I visited probably about 25 years ago in a northeastern state, which I won't name, but it's known for maple syrup, cheese, and ice cream. And I went to visit this company, very homestead. They were making granola. They took me into their little, I would call it a shed, where they were making their granola, and kind of looking around and seeing the birds flying around up above where they were making their small batch granola. So it wasn't that safe then. I think it's getting a lot better. One of my roles and roles of the association is really to teach our members, well, first to make them aware that they need to be compliant with the PC rule and with our importer members with FSVP, and then to bring the teaching to them. It's been a challenge. I would guess that probably about a third of them have become compliant. Probably about a third of them want to become compliant, and about a third of them are still not even paying any attention to anything. So it is a challenge, and we look to extension agents and particularly land-grant universities to help educate the specialty food community out there, because they do need the education, and they need the education to be done in a very efficient way, both in time and in cost. So we're looking for that. We put on the fancy food shows. The Winter Fancy Food Show just concluded yesterday in San Francisco. That show has about 1,500 exhibiting companies with about 120,000 products. Our New York show, which is called the Summer Fancy Food Show, is in June in New York City. That has about 2,500 companies and about 180,000 products. So lots of foods that are there. It's where buyers really come to find specialty food products. The association also publishes a magazine called Specialty Food Magazine, has a newsletter called Specialty Food News. We do about 50 educational programs a year and run various competitions. But one of our biggest challenges has been to try to convince our members to become PC compliant and to enable them to have means to be able to do that.
And Ron, you might want to talk to Chris Callahan because he has a very interesting project for a booth in the Summer Fancy Show next year. It's going to be called Told You So, and we're going to have a presentation about all the recalls that we have gone through the year. Hopefully, we're going to have a better audience in the food safety sections there.
You know, that would be interesting. We actually had a little bit of a wrinkle happen in San Francisco. We had a booth for FDA, and we had a booth for FSPCA. FSPCA showed up. I got an email from FDA on Saturday morning saying, oops, the government is shut down. We're not allowed to come over here. So we are trying to help in any manner that we can.
Okay. And Simon?
Hi. It was great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I do want to just quickly say I'm very impressed with how many people have come out for a food safety event in the middle of winter. And for me, this collaborative approach is extremely important. I'm a great advocate that there is no competitive advantage for food safety. And as Robin was saying, whether it's the small businesses that need their help or the large businesses who poison more people, we all are only as strong as our weakest link. So I think sharing and educating is wonderful. A little bit, so I head up the food safety and the food safety plan for Love Beets. We're based out of Rochester. We started exporting from UK in 2010. And then we were lucky enough to build a purpose-built facility on the old Kodak Park in 2016. We were able to then start producing. So we haven't had to take any of our English product now for a year and a half, which is fantastic. And we're growing the beets upstate New York for around 50% of the year or 50% of the crop. And then we take from Texas, Georgia, Colorado, and then we moved back to New York in August time. So we're positioned in Rochester on the Kodak Park, and that was extremely useful for us. They have the steam, electricity, chilled water, and wastewater treatment plant that can handle all of our especially pink water that we send to them. So we've got two product streams. We've got a low-acid canned food, which is a sous vide product that we vacuum pack and then a low-acid canned cook in a retort, which follows the HACCP plans. And then we've got a fresh, lightly infused, cooked pH and chill controlled product that we add flavors, white wine balsamic and chili, and recently a beet salsa. That's the company. So yeah, and since moving to the Rochester area and starting to grow the US beets and making the US, we've been able to grow around the 34% on the year. And that's been able to be pushing out the grown in New York message.
Just want to make sure that I got this. So, Ned, you're going to be under FSMA as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah. How that has been impacting your the way that your company operates?
Well, we started in the food processing in the back of house in our restaurants. So when we started, it was governed by our county and our city health department. So the level of inspection and requirement was relatively low that compared to FSMA. And now that we have a separate facility, we went to the classes last year put on by the University of Maryland Extension Service, which was great, and also subsidized by them, which was great.
Even
Hats
better.
off to them. But we have, our biggest challenges are to create a space that our staff, and we have about 60 people working in our facility processing the food, to leave the outside world behind and go through a space mentally and physically where they can transition into the kitchen. That's never been the case before now, and that's one of our big projects this year. What I took from FSMA was yes, it's important to have all the record keeping and controls, but it's also a mindset for a group of people that are restaurant people and not necessarily in the large-scale food production like most of the folks, I think, that come to a conference like this. They have a narrow process and people trained to do those, whereas ours, and I think maybe in Robin's case, we have a very wide variety of things. We do produce, we make 500 different kinds of soup, we do 20 different kinds of pies, bread, we make our own jam and can it. So we have a lot of things that we have to cover every day, and one of the issues that we're having with FSMA is the SOPs that we now need to write, keep on file, and follow. And I mean, we're over 500, so, and we don't have a person that we've yet hired and assigned to do that. So we have our work cut out for us, but we've taken it on, so we're going to get there.
Because you also have to deal with the produce rule, or not?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we do.
Yeah,
And
that's-
we do buy milk. We do buy raw milk from the farm. I have a milk hauler's license. So we do bring raw milk in and pasteurize it, but that's one of those processes that, had I known what I'd have to do, I probably wouldn't have done it. Because we invested this much money to get started, and now we have to invest this much money to be compliant.
Continue.
So, that's the business.
Yeah, so all that you need to do now is start to make pasteurized juice and some seafood, so we're going to be covered by all the rules.
Well, it's funny, seafood, I don't want to break it up, but we didn't even know about the seafood. I'm
He
confessing
thought
my
of it.
ignorance here. The seafood HACCP, as part of FSMA, was never a part of, your normal restaurant or food processing things for us. So we just dropped seafood from our facility. In the meantime, we have so many other things to worry about. We just dropped that completely, so.
Okay, so we had that question planned. Maybe we can follow up with that because we want to know, what would you say if you have to, so while implementing FSMA, the regulations that pertain to your product, so to your company, did you need to compromise at any level? And that would be a case.
We're a traditional food company, so we try to adhere to a lot of traditional techniques and methods. So while we have not compromised, we have let some things go. A couple years ago, we started our first part of our dairy kitchen was ice cream, and we wanted to make it from scratch, the old-fashioned way, without guar gum or without any stabilizers. We cracked the eggs, we brought the milk in, we pasteurized the milk, we pasteurized the egg milk base and sugar base. So when we got through all that, we enjoyed the ice cream. It tasted good, but when we went to sell it, of course, it's not $1 a scoop, it's $3 a scoop. And after 18 months of working with our inspector, and our inspectors have been great. I mean, I think at first they probably drew straws on who got to go to our place versus the big places who are all, they had their stuff together. But anyway, our inspectors have been great. But ice cream is one of the things that we've just discontinued because it was both economics and the regulations. It was probably a combination of both. Mm-hmm. And if anything, the FSMA, this has, in a good way, in a painful way at first, but in a good way, takes a small processor like us and says, if you want to do this well, you've got to shed these other things. You can't do 50 things. You've got to do 3 things. Hopefully not 3, but like, when hear Simon about the Beets. I mean, that sounds great. You've got a great facility and doing a few things. That's, we're on the other end of the spectrum, but I think we have to come closer to the center in order to economically succeed.
And Simon has an interesting perspective because was it 3 years ago that you came to the U.S. to continue working for Love Beets, correct? So before that, you were in Australia?
UK. So,
UK already.
Yeah.
So tell us about the difference in perspective in the regulation. What you had then in UK might have changed, I'm not sure, and what you have to face here in the US.
I guess the biggest difference for UK versus US is the food safety standards are driven by the retailers in the UK. There's 5 retailers that sell approximately 80% of all produce in the UK. And they're the ones who are driving the standards above UK and as it was above EU standards. So not too dissimilar from US, where we had the EU standards, which are like your federal, and then we had our UK standards, which were like your state standards. So they could be different. You could have a slightly differing view. And then you've got the retailers who are driving the standards further and further. The retailers certainly, though, worked, there was quite a few steering groups. So I belong to a Chilled Food Association, and that would come together to help standardise SOPs. You could sit with the retailers and you'd draw up the standard SOPs, and you could come up with a common answer between the producers and the retailers, and that way you came up with an answer that you agreed to, and it was above and beyond the legislation, but it also got a little bit away from the earlier discussion about where are you doing something extra to somebody else? Are you putting yourself at a competitive disadvantage by having X-rays, say, in your factory over metal detection? If you know you're all doing X-rays, it's not a problem. You don't mind, and that stopped you looking over the hedge to think, can I do it a different way, cheaper, and doing it the right way and complying to what really the retailers are driving. As far as our, you call your FDA inspectors, we have health inspectors. I saw my health inspector probably every 3 years. She risk assessed us out, basically, partly from government cuts, but partly because why not risk assess it? If we've got, I think in one of our factories we had about 6 different audit standards, of which 4 of them were unannounced. And that was the way we've progressed the food safety, rightly or wrongly. BRC or SQF was supposed to be the one audit that solved everything. It solved everything up until about 2005. And then people started getting worried about certification bodies. And then Horsegate destroyed what was left of BRC. So Horsegate, there's the French supplier putting horses into beef burgers and forgetting to tell everybody that they'd put horse in there. And they were basically running an illegal C shift. So they'd have a legitimate A and B shift that got cows in and they process them. And then they'd bring the B shift in and mix it all up again and put the horse in. And that, again, that was the biggest one where there was 3 of the retailers who got stung really heavy with that because it was in their supply chain. But even the 2 that were completely unaffected, they lost all their burger sales as well. And that was the point where they started to drive down. And actually, they've gone very similar to FSMA. They've called it TASAP and risk. So there's 2, TASAP and I can't remember the other one now. But it's about vulnerability in your supply chain, which is the intentional adulterification of food, and then the commercial benefits of adulterification of food. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't quite comply with FSMA, though.
Okay, that's different. But so you're saying something about leveling the field, which is an advantage that you seem to be pointing out about FSMA. It's okay. And Robin, is that what your clients are saying too? How many do you have?
We deal with about 50 customers a year. So I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things that were said there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry. Thank you. I watched the panel this afternoon, and I decided that the buyers are setting the standard here. I mean, yes, we've got FSMA, but if you don't meet the buyer's standards, you don't sell your product. You've got to have the audit. And so I think, as Abby pointed out and others have stated afterwards, there's a much bigger issue about how you align FSMA and the auditing so that we put the least pressure on each of the individual companies so they just have one task to carry out. And that's the holy grail, I think. So when FSMA came along, we were one of the lucky people. Mike Taylor came to our facility with, I think, 11 inspectors one day in August in 2013. And prior to him coming, I sort of read up on FSMA, and I thought, I need to know more about this. We saw two areas that were really important to small producers. I think the most important thing was to get the small producer to start doing lot tracking. So in Vermont, we put together a project. We ran through the Food Hub. We raised some funds, and we had a consultant come in. And what we did was we looked for a piece of software that would help small businesses do lot tracking. And the sort of condition of this software had to be, it must work on an iPhone and a Samsung phone. It couldn't be Windows-based or anything like that. It had to be an app. And we selected a product called, after going through, I think, 131 different products, we selected 8 products, and we had an advisory panel. Chris was on the advisory panel with us. And we selected a product called Deer Inventory. And that's D-E-A-R, Inventory. It was actually a product made in Australia, in Australasia. But it was really, really good. And it would do lot tracking, one down, one up, etc. And we were able to give our small customers a tool then to do lot tracking. And to me, if we could get these small companies to do lot tracking, we made everything a lot safer overnight. The other thing that I took out of FSMA for us personally was temperature control of trucks. What we were finding was a lot of different temperatures coming to the dock on different products, and I implemented in our trucks a remote sensor, so we could actually monitor the trucks at any time in order to make sure we kept the quality control of the trucks. So those are the two things that really stuck out for me on FSMA.
Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting question that you mentioned that about the need for monitoring the temperature in the trucks, but those are your trucks, right? You do your own distribution.
Yeah, we do distribution.
Is that your case, Simon?
No, we don't.
How do you solve that issue of distribution of your products? Because you also have refrigerated products, most
Correct.
of them, if not all.
So we've gone down the warranty route of signing our distribution haulier companies up to a mini code of practice that says, under these circumstances and under these events, if you exceed this temperature, then you must call us. If you have a breakdown, etc. And then we've asked that all of their records be available to us in 2 hours. But yeah, we are actually looking at a data logger that is wireless, so you can put it on anything and it will remote. You can put it in any box you want and it will tell you the location of the tracker and the temperature. So we're going to start trialing that. They're about $30 each, so they're not much more than the standard $20 ones, which you have to plug in and you never see again. And that way, yeah, we can track it all the way to store.
Okay, and you add that to the records in your food safety plan?
Yeah, yeah, we're trialing it now.
Okay. Ron, what do you hear about that? The logistics, the issues related to logistics from food manufacturers?
Well, I think they need to solve those logistics because the products need to be kept at the proper temperatures. You know, so getting those items and putting them in so you can track their products is very important. I know that a lot of our our members that are doing cheeses and that are doing pâtés and are doing meat products have been doing that for a long, long time, particularly some of them that have had recall problems. But again, that's another expense. You know, if you're a small company and, you know, your case is worth $100, putting a $20 tracker in it that you may never see again, you know, raises the price by 20%. So all of this becomes a big challenge for the small companies, but they are trying to do as much as they can with it.
So give us an idea. So you have access, you have contacts with, you know, hundreds of food manufacturers. What's the general perception? Is it, so it does cost some money, but is there a silver lining? Is there an advantage somewhere? What's the general perception of the implementation of the Food Safety Modernization Act here in the third year?
I'm not going to say there's a silver lining. I think most of the companies do want to comply with the law.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they feel that it has gotten them to really pay attention to things that they probably should have been paying attention to for a long time. And many of them have to comply anyway, because if you're looking at a Kroger or a Publix or a Target, or if you're looking at any of those retailers, they're requiring you to comply with the law anyway. Some of them are using it as a competitive advantage, you know, saying that they are FSMA compliant. At the Winter Fancy Food Show, which I just came back on, there were a lot of people that had that in their booth to let people know about it. But a lot of them seeing it as a big challenge, and I think some of the companies are seeing it as a way that larger manufacturers who have been losing huge amounts of business. The 20 top food manufacturers in the U.S., I think I heard the number has lost something like $20 billion worth of business in the last 5 years, and it's all being taken up by specialty food companies, natural food companies. And you know, as an association that wants to promote an industry, we want that to continue. But I think that the law, the FSMA, is going to make that a little more difficult for that to happen.
Would you like, any specific area where you think that makes it especially hard and something that we address? Because the objective here is that extension programs understand what's going on. So what, if you would recommend us to focus on this is the biggest challenge, what would that be?
I think the biggest challenge is to identify the manufacturers who are in your area that could use your help, to go out and reach out to them. First, to kind of promote the need to them, and then to go out and give them services. We've done it with the University of Massachusetts. We did a blended class, which I think worked very well. So any way that you can go out and help these companies. The specialty food industry over the last year has grown at about 8% a year, and mass food is growing at about 1.5%. So it's growing almost 6 times faster. And these companies want to continue, and it's a lot of people that it's, you know, I mean, like, well, kind of like Robin here and like Ned, you know, they have these dreams that they want to accomplish, and they make these companies that make that happen. And it's sad to see regulations making those dreams not happen. And I think the extensions and land-grant universities are really the best way for companies to comply. And I know that there's a issue with time, there's an issue with money, there's an issue with capacity, but as much as possible, I feel that's the way to help the companies be compliant.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there are those issues, but the important issue is we are trying to address food safety. And I'll go back to that in a bit, and I want really to hear what Robin and Ned have to talk about that. But I would just go back to Simon, because you have, we have been discussing this, your need for validation studies. So you have a very specific process, and we are not sure how to address all the questions. So we know about the needs for validation there and the costs. So you want to talk a little bit about that and what other needs you are facing because of the fact that your products are covered under the PC rule?
Yeah, so that's, two sort of questions. Yeah, so some of the stuff we're talking about is the validation is for the new products that we want to put in the market. So just making sure that we've got all the answers up front to what the risks and the process are going to be for the new products that we want to do over the next 6 months to a year. But then if we work back to the current products, when we were looking at our FSMA and our plans, is going back to and finding all the information that we've learned over the last 15 years when we've been packing the products, and to recheck and re-sense check what we've been doing was right. I think, I can't remember, but one of the courses is that I went on, and they said that the past performance is great, sort of well done, but it's never going to be an indicator of your future results, and that's where your validation was so important for us. We'd been lucky enough to be in the beet business for 15 years, but the FSMA made us go back to really school and start again to say, yep, I've got a pH of 4. Is the pH of 4 acceptable? Yes. Everything says 4.5 for listeria, so I'm good, I'm okay, let's move on to the next question. And you go back through and you actually then write down the reference where you found out, and therefore now your HARP-C becomes part of, for me, a training document or an aid memoir for my team when they, when something goes wrong and they need to investigate, then they can go to the link and just look at what we decided when we made but that's where the validation for me becomes very nice.
Yeah, there was also the timing.
Yeah.
You didn't have much time to develop that process and have the documentation available for registration as well. So it's a big challenge. And it's not only about the cost, it's also about the time that we have to solve that issue. So if I can go back to Ned here, so can you talk to us about your needs in terms of, so I listed validation, employee training, record keeping, and food safety expertise. Those are the things that I had listed that I thought that we could discuss here as new needs that you may be facing and how you're dealing with those.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Training, and in the past, our primary focus with training was with the quality control of what we're doing in the building. And then now that's shifted or added on to training logs for hand washing, sanitized bucket maintenance, all those things that we didn't do very well before or didn't document and have structured. The way I think that if you're asking how the Extension Service or this organization can help is to have some sort of template or site to go to say this, these 3 things have worked to tackle this issue, versus when our inspector comes in, he or she makes it clear what we need, what the goal is, but not so much how to get there. And so we're writing our own templates and having the training, and then the inspector might come in and say, these 3 parts of it are pretty good, but this part needs to be rewritten, and then we'll rewrite that. So that's a little bit of a challenge / frustration to get to that level where we can be, where we can welcome our inspectors and score 100. So that's been the #1 thing lately on the training side.
Mm-hmm. So some more guidance towards the elaboration of the food safety plans.
Right, and we're not asking to be to be led or have our hand held, but just to have some structure. The class was great, but just to have some ongoing resource to go to say, okay, we're starting a new process. What are the key points to hit there? So,
okay. What about record keeping?
Record keeping, I think that's something that is it's a habit that's difficult to pick up, but we are 10 times better than we've ever been, and now it's just becoming part of the routine. And I mentioned earlier about changing our mindset when we come into the building. We have a wide range of folks working. We have different languages spoken, so getting someone to come in and know that, yes, they have to do all the sanitation things, but then also have a really keen eye on the record keeping, that is another challenge. Where we put them is important, and we're learning what's best there. The flow of the work we're having to change, but it's nothing like nothing else. It's just something you have to work at and get better at.
And Robin, record keeping, training, validation.
So we, as I said earlier, we're a USDA facility as well. There's nothing that focuses you more than knowing that your inspector's going to be on site sometime during the day. Your record keeping's always really good. And so we're taking our experience with the USDA, where we have an inspector on site every day, and moving it to PC. And it's like you've learned to swim, you just carry on swimming. As an observation, is those people who've worked in the USDA area are really good people to hire for food safety in the non-USDA area, because they're just these habits are inbuilt in them. And the other thing is the USDA tend to be very hard on ready-to-eat foods. In terms of your comment about pH, etc. I mean, the ready-to-eat foods that we're making in the facility, we have a very robust methodology for record keeping, etc. We also, with our young and emerging companies, we're required. Well, it's not required, but we require batch salmonella tests. So we want to make sure that these younger companies are putting product out there. It's a little more expensive, but it's really important to be safe as you're building up your business.
And tell us about the process. So when a company comes to you, they probably have a new product. I suppose it varies, but they want to bring this product to market. What's the approach there in terms of what you require from them for the food safety plan and food safety in general? What do you require?
We provide them with a low-cost first day where they do 4 hours of processing, really pilot processing the product. And then we sit down in the afternoon and we go through HACCP-HARP's plan and really understand their process. What we're trying to do is understand their level of food safety knowledge. I mean, there's really two approaches. And I don't know if Brad's still here from Commonwealth. Their approach was get the food company to fill out an application and give this business plan, etc. But they're located in Boston, and they have a long list of people who want to come to their facility, so they can use that strategy. For us, we're trying to get people into the kitchen so they're not scared of the kitchen, and we work out with people what their experiences are. Excuse me for
Red button. Yeah.
the trouble of having a phone ringing. Yeah, we're trying to work out what their experiences are, so we know what level of help to give each of those organizations. But it's interesting. We have a customer at the moment who is making a bird seed mix. We call it bird seed, but it's an organic product, a lot of mixture, and they were really resistant to doing any preventative control work. They're exempt, and they said, well, we don't need to. Then one day, they got approached by Amazon. And all of a sudden, this changed, and they needed to do a quick audit, and they needed to get this. So we literally helped them get their shop in order so that they could then get an audit from Amazon. And now they're on the Amazon website. Their sales are going up, etc. So it just comes back to the fact that if you have aspirations to sell to a big box or a large online organization, you've got to do PC from day one.
Mm-hmm. So you're now offering those services in providing food safety plans, and so that was either new or expanded as the regulation came into place, correct? Was that a new opportunity for your business?
We just took what we were doing for the USDA customers, for meat customers, and we just moved it across to non-meat customers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our approach, and I apologize to all the consultants in the room, our approach is to help those small companies with their plans. They're overwhelming, they're daunting, the companies don't know how to do them. So what we're trying to teach is the purpose behind the plan and to sort of embed that DNA in the company of why these plans are important, to understand where the critical point in their plans are. And we do not charge them. And we've been criticized for this before, not charging them. But to me, it's getting them into the kitchen and having them start to make the product. And if you say you can't come into the kitchen before you have your plan in place, then the possibility is they won't move forward with their company. They're not going to get that momentum started.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Simon, I remember we had a conversation about so you have a program with suppliers.
Yeah.
So, and we wanted to talk about how your relationship with suppliers have changed, or new challenges that you have been you had to face because of the rule. So, how is that experience been? How is your program working? How it's changed since you guys came from the UK to US?
I guess the questions haven't necessarily changed so much as we transitioned over. We're still very similar to the buyers' conversations in the previous session. Is we ask for the audits, but what we've found as we're going into certainly FSMA, we've asked them for more and more, and we're asking for warranties, or asking them if they're compliant and what policies they have around food safety, what's their recall policy. We've got sort of a self-assessment questionnaire that we ask them to do. We're finding not quite two types of companies. One company that goes, yep, there you go, and it's all ready. Another one that goes, why? And there's, and for me, that's been a nice, useful way of putting a risk assessment. They're the companies I now will go and visit first, and they're the ones get audited or will help them along the journey. But yeah, from a FSMA point of view, that supply chain risk assessment has always been there, but we're asking, I suppose, more and more questions about our suppliers and have they changed their businesses to comply with the new legislations. And yeah, some of them haven't, which we'll work with.
Anyone else want to make comments about that? Relationship with suppliers and buyers, has that changed?
Well, I can say that since I think Bruno sat us this way. I'm the little processor, and Robin's here, and Simon's down there. He's this big. But for us, it's always been fun to go to a farm and talk to a farmer and buy something, buy some fruit, buy some meat. So I was listening to the prior panel as well about the food buyers. So we've always asked questions, observed, tasted, talked to about methods and techniques. But now that we are following these guidelines, that relationship is, altered forever. And there'll be some places where we won't be, we'll just shy away from buying some raw materials. I mean, I guess it's the evolution. I think in some cases it's unfortunate, but that's where we are.
Bruno, I can add, for some of the specialty food producers, they want to try to keep their cost of ingredients down. And by having to go to a lot of different suppliers, that would be a way that they would be able to do that. And now when they, need to verify the safety of the suppliers, it makes it more challenging for them to go out and, change suppliers, because they have to put that into their food safety plan, and it just makes it harder for them to maintain their cost of ingredients.
Right. Ron, your group does the Good Food Awards, is that right? Or you're associated with the Good Food Award?
We don't, but we work with them.
Okay, so we won a Good Food Award this year for a jam, and it was out in San Francisco. I couldn't go, but we bought the strawberries from a farm who I guarantee you doesn't have this compliance. And however, one of the purposes to go to San Francisco was to meet buyers, perhaps from a Williams and Sonoma or something like that, to carry the jam. But that chain would have been broken if the buyer would say, what's the source of the fruit and do they comply? So it's just one of those things that that's where we're going. So, but I thought it was interesting that you talked about the food show that I was going to go to, but I didn't. But Anyway.
So we're going to discontinue that, Jim? How are we going to do it?
No. We're just not going to sell to Weeds in Sonoma.
Oh, really?
We're going to sell it ourselves.
There's a lot, I mean, the big retailers are really important out there to grow sales, but there are a lot of retailers out there.
Right.
I know right now everybody's concerned, and this isn't with food safety, but with Whole Foods and the Amazon changes, is going to really hurt the specialty food business. But Whole Foods is, I think, less than 1% of all food retail in the country. So, there's just a lot of other opportunities. So if Williams-Sonoma doesn't want it, you'll find many other people that'll buy it from you.
Mm-hmm. So if we make a summary, if you look at a wholesome approach to what have been put in place, would you say that everything that was required was needed to increase food safety or led to an increase in food safety? Would you say that introducing these food safety plans led to an increase in the safety of your final product? What do you think, Simon?
Yeah, well, we were dealing with 2 co-packers for 5 years as we were building up the company, and yeah, I would say, looking at what I've seen in other businesses now, and those co-packers from what I worked with 5 years ago, they've a big move forward in the food safety standards with this, with people going back to looking, changing from HACCP to Harp C, and looking back at their areas. I think certainly for us, we removed allergies because of Harp C. It's always a bugbear of mine as a technical team to have an allergy in my factory, so as soon as they gave me the responsibility for the new product development, I took it out. And that was primarily driven by Harp C and the processing side. So it's enabled us to change, and it's de-risked the business from that side of it.
Mm-hmm. And the story that Robin said before about your client that not can, in order to sell to Amazon, needs to comply with the regulation would be somewhat in that direction. But do you think that the rule gives your clients better chances in the market, better chances to grow? Is a good experience?
Yes. So with our clients doing non-meat, they're regulated by the Department of Health. And so the Department of Health require us to have the facility permit, and they require the client to have the processing permit. And so we had no legal input into that, and the Department of Health really was the regulatory authority for the client doing the processing. Now with FSMA, we were getting our clients, even though they're exempt, to start putting HACCP plans in place. And I think that gives you a good ramp to their ultimate goal, which is the audit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every customer comes to us saying, well, I want to sell to Whole Foods, or I want to sell to Amazon, or I want to sell to Shop and Save, or one of the other large companies. We start them off with an introduction to a co-op, because co-ops are more forgiving in which products they'll sell. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, if their goal is to hit the big time, they've got to get that ramp on food safety, and that's the push we have.
Okay. And Ned, leaving the strawberry jelly aside, what's your take on that?
There is that fork in the road where this program sounds great. I wish I would have known you earlier, because I probably would have went to you versus trying to do it, by trial and error. Yeah. But I think there's that fork in the road where you continue on with what you're suggesting and getting all the regulation and go into the big time. Or if you wanted to sell to the co-op or sell to your neighborhood store, and that would be it, and that would be your lifestyle. Now, chances are you won't be able to meet, or it'll be very hard to meet all these regulations and sell on a smaller scale and make a living. So that's one of the downfalls with this. I think it's going to be difficult to do all things unless you're fortunate enough to live near a facility like Robbins that would provide all that infrastructure for you to go in and make these things. In our case, you know, we're investing in a building and building it out. You know, we're, you know, in the millions of dollars and trying to do all these things, and then, you know, the wheel's turning and you have to feed it. So I think there's a real, you know, fork in the road that I don't think there's any small producers in here, I'm not sure, but that's one of the things that I see as a big result of this. You have to make a choice.
Okay, so I have a couple questions in here that I want to make sure that we all at least try to contribute something to, and it's kind of, this one is a little bit of a unexpected one, but we all complain at some point about the rule. There is something we don't like. Maybe it's the whole rule. But if you had the pen, a regulatory pen, now you could rewrite it. Is there anything that you would particularly change, or what would be your contribution to make it better? Yeah.
About the regulations?
Yeah, about the Food Safety Modernization Act and all the things that you have to do now.
Well, I would say, I mean, I don't know if this is written, but to make them gradual, to, you know, so that you're stepping into it. That's the way our inspector treats them, fortunately.
Yeah. Now we have the companies different depending on the size of the company. You have, but then what you're saying, if you could need to comply to different sections, slowly bring each section in.
Correct. And for us, that's just a financial thing. So our inspector, in terms of our logging our refrigeration in the building, you know, we have several refrigerators and we have logs for all those refrigerators, and they're all handwritten. So while she went to after her last inspection, she said, "This is good, but, you know, a couple inspections from now, I'm going to want this to be electronic, monitored 24 hours a day." So, you know, we might have to build a new walk-in and install this, and, you know, so stuff like that. She's been very good to say,
I was meant to say that.
This is the regulation. This is where you're going to need to get to. I'll give you 6 months, you know, whatever it may, you know, whatever that may be.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you know, that's maybe not written in the rule, but that's the way she's interpreted, which I think is a good thing.
Okay. Robin?
I think aligning the regulations with and getting the buyers to have a standard level of audit. To me, you want to monitor your production once, and have one set of standards that you're aiming for. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing that concerns me at the moment is that there are many standards out there. So how does a small supplier manage those standards? So I think, you know, for organizations that are doing less than $1 million a year, it would be really good to dumb them down to, at both the buyer's level and the FSMA level, to one standard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's certainly a question that you want to bring to someone in extension to make sure that all the exceptions are in place for your clients, and some of them might be able to take advantage of some might not. But yeah, that's a very good point. Ron?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Robin that the one standard would be very helpful. I mean, it's hard for the small manufacturers to even understand what the multiple standards are, even less than to comply with them. I find, too, that for some of our members, the FSVP rule is really difficult for them because they aren't using all American products. They're using products that they're bringing in, and they don't know who's supposed to be verifying the safety of those products. And I think that just could have been made a lot simpler. I know they came out with a guidance on it today, but guidances have a tendency to make them more complicated rather than more simpler. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I just think that could have been a little bit better for the smaller manufacturers.
So we didn't talk much about the foreign supply verification program. Can you just talk a little bit more about what you're hearing from industry on that rule?
Well, we actually get more questions on that than the PC rule. It's just a lot of confusion about who is the importer and who is to make people comply, and what kind of records that the person that is the importer has to keep, and, you know, how FDA is going to, you know, go to some warehouse in New Jersey, you know, and look at these things. So that's what the That's what the confusion is, and then there's confusion of, companies that are buying spices, and, sometimes they get a good deal, they import them themselves, so they have to be the FSVP importer, but sometimes they're buying them through somebody else. It all just kind of messes up that process of things coming in. That's their challenge.
Yeah, I taught the PCQI for human foods for a group of FDA inspectors, and they were working the border. And I tried to talk to a few of them, the same one that you went. You remember them, right? And something that I remember is that at least 5 of them were retiring the next year, and all of them said, "I'm so glad that I'm not going to have to do exactly what you said, complying with that rule and inspecting the importer and figuring out who's liable for what." That's the big question that I'm hearing. Yeah, okay. And Simon?
Yeah, I suppose from my point of view, I'd just say that everything does seem to be all coming together all at once. So your PCs, your foreign supply, your produce safety, it all seems to be coming together, and the guidance is half a mile behind of what's happening. So if we can swap that round, that would be my request, or have a 1-year amnesty where you have your mock audit or your mock inspections and then the legislative ones, which is sort of happening, I suppose, through the educate to enforce route, but make that crystal clear and say that, yeah, this is the way we're going to do it. You're going to have that 1-year warning, softer launch, and then set the date and stick to it.
Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, that came up before. Like, we hope that the manufacturers that are compliant will have somewhat have that recognized through some kind of program. But okay, so what's the bottom line here after these first years of the Food Safety Modernization Act? What's your how would you summarize it? Is that? Do you think that we are increasing the safety level of our food? Do you think that this is bringing American food manufacturers an advantage in the American market to sell foods now that we know how the food supply verification program works? Does FSMA indeed favor American companies that will be able to comply? So what's your take on that? So what's the bottom line impact of FSMA for the American food manufacturer?
Are you asking me?
All of you.
Okay. I feel that it's making the food safer for the American food manufacturer, obviously. I don't think it's affecting American companies being able to export their products, which is a big business for some companies. It's across the board for everybody. So it's not making anybody more, more sales or anything like that. I do think it's leveling the playing field a little bit. I think it's making products safer, which is really important. And I think it is affecting the smaller companies a lot more than the larger companies. And what caused a lot of this to be regulated was that the larger companies were having the big outbreaks. So, I do think that that's a little bit unfair for the smaller manufacturers.
Mm-hmm. You agree with that, Simon?
Yeah, I think it's going to work the other way. From what I see is product coming into the US is going to be slightly harder to come through. You've got to comply to the same standards as your domestic market, and that's going to make some of the importation harder. I get a few emails from colleagues back in the UK. There's a lot of people circulating, foreign supply verification, scaremongering emails saying you've now got to be compliant. So yeah, if you're a consultant, go to England. They'll all need help on foreign supply verification because they're all trying to run around and do training programs on that. But yeah, from where I'm sitting now, I think it should help the domestic be safer, and it will stop imports.
Which is a very, very interesting point, because we've seen that companies that want to import food to the United States are having that idea that they need to comply with the food safety verification program. But that's a rule, and that was discussed yesterday, that applies to the importer. So what they need is a PCQI for human foods.
Yeah.
So exactly to make sure that we are leveling the playing field, which many American manufacturers would be saying that was not the case before. So anyways, very good point. Robin and Ned, you want to say something about it?
Yeah, I just think it's accelerating the adoption of food safety in the smaller companies. I think from a Vermont perspective, I've always found the Department of Health overview of small food companies lacking. It's a once-a-year inspection, and there's very little direction on how food should be processed. And I think this brings, it starts to create a benchmark of what they should be doing at an early stage in their life.
Mm-hmm. Ned?
Yeah, I think it is making the food safer, and like Robin said, if you're starting up a company when you know what your end result is and you join that or get the regulations right up front, that's great. I do think that the field the intent is to be level. I think large companies that have the ability to have compliance officers and things like that, might have some advantage over the startup or the small company. And I think that the small company has to make choices that a restaurateur that's selling the same type of products doesn't have to make. The restaurant guidelines for a restaurateur making something that's then packaged and put on their shelf for sale are far lower compared to what FSMA is. So there's that difference in the playing field. On the other hand, I'm glad that there is some difference, because I think that the restaurants are going to be able to continue to do things that the larger processors may have to make compromises and be then unable to do. So,
thank you. So, before we go open to questions, do you want to make some final remarks? Anyone? You don't have to.
Let's go for questions.
I would just like to say that the Extension Service, which got us on the right track with this, I think that role is really important, and if there was some budgetary discussion earlier in the prior panel about it, but I think that's a great way, because I think a lot of people, and Ron, I don't know, but I've been to the Fancy Food Show, and a lot of those companies are very big, but a lot of them are also very small, and it would be surprising to me that half of them even know what FSMA is. I would be surprised, because I know a lot of them, and we talk about it, and they're like, "What is that?" So I would be there's this education got to come from somewhere.
No, I agree. I think we've gotten a little bit better than half. I think we're down to a third, but there's still a lot of companies that don't know. And for the extension people, I would recommend that, with all the small food manufacturers who are in your territories and in your states, if you are having trouble with funding, reach out to them, because they want you to be there to help them. And small businesses have a lot of impact on legislative stuff. I know when we've had to do some things on the federal basis, you get a small business person to go in and talk to a congressman, it can really affect how they think. So when those budgets do come up, I know they come up all the time, get some of the leaders, small business food manufacturers in your area to go in and talk to those state representatives to be on your side for the funding.
And I keep wondering if specialty foods would be able to help on that.
We'd like to help. We do a lot of it on the federal basis. We don't do as much on state basis as we would like to. But if there is, we have done it. So if, for instance, Massachusetts is going to lose funding, we could mobilize our members in Massachusetts, probably about 80 different members, to have them reach out, and we'd be happy for anybody that is having those challenges to reach out to us to help.
Yeah, because that's an issue, as we had Michelle raising it before. What should the extension programs be doing? And we know, everyone that is in extension know, there is a lot of work to do. There's always more. And what we should be doing is a very good question, but then how much does that cost, and what kind of funds we need to make sure that those programs are fairly offered to the companies that most need them. So that input, that conversation with industry and everyone involved in that, in the network, including food consultants, testing labs, everyone, consumer organizations should take part in that too, and what is needed to make sure that the food products that are reaching the market are indeed safe. You have something to add there, Ned? No?
I was just going to say that prior to this, the Extension Service we had some interaction with, and certainly with the inspectors we had plenty. But it wasn't until this that the inspector and the Extension Service got together, and maybe this is common knowledge out there, but that was the missing link for us because they talked to us, the training was set up, and it's all connected now, whereas before that wasn't the case. That may be a Maryland thing, I'm not sure, but that was a big help.
Yeah. Okay, so we're good for questions.
Great.
Chris?
Thank you all very much. Questions, comments for the processing panel? It's that hour of the day.
It's been a long day.
Which means I'm just going to wait a little longer. You're in Baltimore, Maryland. Mary?
Hi, this is a comment for the Love Beets. I've seen the Love Beets and I've had them and they're great. And but I saw them. Now, are they all sold refrigerated only, or do you have some that are shelf stable?
Yeah, correct. There's the sous vide one is ambient, shelf stable, so that's the vacuum packed one.
Good,
And
because I
then-
saw them shelf stable. I was like, how could these be shelf stable? But they must be okay because they're not in the refrigerator. Yeah, no, they looked great, and I bought them and ate them and didn't get sick or anything. But I was still like thinking, how did they do that? That's really cool. So now I know more about that.
The Kvass product is coming, right?
So that comes with a seal from the Cornell Food Venture Center, so it's good.
Other questions, comments? Okay, I can take a hint. I just want to thank you, thank the panelists again very much. Bruno, thank you for moderating. I appreciate you all. And I just had a few final points I wanted to make. First of all, thank you again to everybody for making the time and traveling and being here. I want to thank the program sponsors behind all of us. For NECAFS, it's the FDA with the grant award to help seed the regional center. We've also had support from the USDA through other regional centers and also through the various food safety outreach projects. I want to also say, just summarize a little bit, meeting outputs. So we've had a lot of conversation the past 2 days. We're going to have a little bit more tomorrow for the NECAFS steering team. And I'm making this up as we go a little bit, but our plan is we have been collecting meeting notes. We have at least two excellent note takers who have been keeping track of all of this on their laptops. Thank you both very much. Plan to get the meeting notes summarized and posted on the NECAFS website. We've also had Tim and Andy collecting video of the various meetings today's in its totality. So we will plan to put an edited version of that on our YouTube channel, probably in the form of chapters, so you can pick and choose what you want to look at. And that's also for folks who weren't able to make it. So colleagues of yours who may have some benefit from some of the sessions. And we'll make the PowerPoints available as well on the NECAFS website. Tomorrow we do have a steering team meeting. The steering team helps guide NECAFS. We have a lot to digest and to talk about tomorrow based on the past 2 days and the past year and looking ahead. But I do want to let everybody know, even if you're not part of the steering team, we will be taking stock of what we've heard over the past couple of days and what we've done over the past year and thinking ahead and planning ahead based on that.